The mining colony of New Busan hummed with its usual morning activity as the twin suns crested the horizon of Kepler 442b. Park Ji-won adjusted his safety helmet and checked the atmospheric readings on his datapad, the numbers glowing steady green against the pale morning light. Another routine day extracting rare earth minerals from the planet's crust, or so he thought. High above the stratosphere, something far more dangerous than any mining accident descended through the clouds. Zeth-Kar, last of the legendary Void. Stalkers piloted his obsidian ship toward the human settlement below. His 8-foot frame filled the command chair, chitinous exoskeletons catching the starlight that filtered through his vessel's transparent aluminum viewports. Razor-sharp claws traced idle patterns across the control surface as he studied the thermal signatures of the colony. For 3,000 years, Zeth-Kar's kind had been the galaxy's apex predators. Entire star systems paid tribute to avoid their wrath. The Altarian Empire had surrendered 17 worlds after a single Void Stalker demonstration. The crystalline beings of Proxima Centauri still sang death songs when his kind's ships appeared in their skies. Fear was a currency Zeth-Kar had never needed to earn. It was simply given. The human colony registered barely 3,000 life signs, pathetically small, laughably vulnerable. Most species would have already begun broadcasting surrender frequencies by now, begging for mercy that rarely came. Zeth-Kar's mandibles clicked in anticipation of the familiar terror that would greet his arrival. His ship touched down in the center of New Busan's main plaza with barely a whisper of displaced air. The Void Stalker technology made no sound, cast no shadow that could be easily detected. Zeth-Kar activated his personal cloaking field and phased through the hull of his vessel, his molecular structure briefly becoming incorporeal as he passed. Through solid matter like smoke through a screen, what he found in the plaza defied every expectation. The humans continued their morning routines. A woman named Kim Nari pushed a hover cart filled with hydroponic vegetables toward the market stalls, her movements unhurried and calm. Construction workers guided massive fabrication drones in expanding the colony's residential sector, their voices carrying across the plaza in casual conversation. Children played some sort of ball game near the central fountain, their laughter echoing off the surrounding buildings. Not one of them fled. Zeth-Kar disabled his cloaking field, his imposing form materializing in full view of the colonists. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian, and his 4 eyes fixed on the nearest humans with predatory intensity. The natural response should have been screaming, panic, immediate evacuation. Instead, the ball rolled to a stop near his feet. A small human child, no more than 6 standard years old, approached without hesitation. The boy had the distinctive features common to this colony's population: dark hair, warm brown eyes that held no trace of fear. He picked up the ball and looked up at Zeth-Kar with genuine curiosity. "Are you here to play?" the child asked in accented Galactic Standard, tilting his head to one side. "We could use another player. I'm Lee Minho." The question struck Zeth-Kar like a physical blow. In 3 millennia of existence, no being had ever asked him to play. The concept seemed as foreign as asking a supernova to knit. Before Zeth-Kar could process an appropriate response, the child's mother approached. She moved with the same unhurried pace as the others, though her eyes held a sharpness that suggested awareness of potential danger. "Minho, don't bother the visitor," she said gently, resting a protective hand on her son's shoulder. Then, addressing Zeth-Kar directly, "Welcome to New Busan. I'm Dr. Han Soo-jin. Are you here on diplomatic business, or do you need assistance with your ship? Diplomatic business?" Zeth-Kar's mind reeled. She spoke to him as if he were a trade representative or a lost traveler, not a legendary harbinger of death. His reputation had preceded him to every corner of the known galaxy. How could these humans not know what he was? "I am Zeth-Kar," he said finally, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that had made entire fleets surrender. "Of the Void Stalkers." Dr. Han's expression didn't change. "Nice to meet you, Zeth-Kar. The colony administrator is Lee Donghae. He handles most official visitors. His office is in the blue building over there. But if you're hungry or need medical attention, we can help with that too. This was impossible. The Void Stalkers were legend, nightmare, the darkness between stars given form. Yet these humans treated his presence as mundane as a supply delivery. Young Minho tugged at his mother's sleeve. Mom, can Zethkar stay for lunch? He looks really tall. I bet he's super hungry. We'll see, sweetheart, Dr. Han replied, her tone carrying the universal parental deflection. To Zethkar, she added, You're welcome to join us. We're having kimchi stew. As mother and child walked away, continuing their interrupted routine, Zethkar remained frozen in the plaza. Around him, the colony's life flowed on as if his arrival had been the most natural thing in the universe. He watched a group of teenagers help an elderly man carry repair materials to a damaged atmospheric processor. He observed workers sharing their lunches with colleagues who had forgotten theirs. He witnessed small acts of casual kindness that seemed as instinctive as breathing. For the first time in his long existence, Zethkar found himself genuinely confused. These creatures should be cowering in terror, begging for their lives, offering tribute to purchase another day of existence. Instead, they offered him lunch. He retreated to his ship, invisible once more, and spent the remainder of the day observing from a distance. The humans of New Busan went about their lives with a strange combination of fragility and resilience that defied his understanding. They were so easily broken. Their bones would snap like twigs under his claws, their flesh would part like water before his weapons. Yet they faced each day with a quiet courage that seemed to assume the universe was fundamentally safe. As the twin suns set and the colony settled into evening routines, Zethkar found himself postponing the inevitable destruction. Tomorrow, he told himself, tomorrow he would understand these peculiar beings well enough to destroy them properly. But deep in his chest, where something resembling a heartbeat with mechanical precision, he felt the first stirring of something entirely new. Something that would change everything. 3 days had passed since Zethkar's arrival, and New Busan continued to confound his expectations. He had taken to observing the colonists from various vantage points, using his phasing abilities to move through walls and his cloaking field to remain undetected. What he witnessed challenged every assumption he had held about prey species. The humans worked with a dedication that seemed almost ritualistic. Park Ji-won led mining teams deep into the planet's crust, extracting precious minerals with carefully calibrated precision. The work was dangerous. Cave-ins were common, toxic, gases required constant monitoring, and the equipment failures that plagued all frontier colonies could turn routine operations deadly. Yet the humans approached each shift with the same calm determination Zethkar had observed in their daily routines. On the third evening, as the colony's atmospheric processors hummed their evening cycle, the ground began to shake. Zethkar felt the tremor first through his ship's sensors. Seismic activity, magnitude 7.2 on the local scale, epicenter 12 kilometers southeast of the colony. The underground mining tunnels would be devastated. A routine disaster for a frontier settlement, the kind that claimed lives and tested survival instincts. His first thought was clinical detachment. He would observe how these humans faced death, how their composure cracked when confronted with genuine existential threat. Then the real shaking began. The earthquake hit New Busan like a massive fist striking the planet's surface. Baningasao, swayed on their stabilized foundations, emergency klaxons wailed across the settlement, and the carefully maintained atmospheric dome flickered as power fluctuations cascaded through the colony's systems. Zethkar watched from his concealed position as the humans responded to catastrophe. There was no panic, no screaming, no desperate flight. Instead, Park Ji-won's voice cut through the emergency frequency static. All surface teams to emergency stations. Tunnel collapse in sectors 7 through 12. We have people trapped down there. Dr. Han Soo-jin appeared at the Emergency Coordination Center within minutes, her medical kit already slung across her shoulder. Colony Administrator Lee Dong-hae coordinated evacuation procedures with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had drilled for this scenario countless times. But it was what happened next that truly shocked Zethkar. Volunteers stepped forward. Not conscripted, not commanded. Not coerced, they simply came. Kim Nari abandoned her evening meal to help coordinate supplies. Teenagers who should have been seeking shelter instead organized communication relays. Even elderly colonists who couldn't physically contribute to rescue operations found ways to help, caring for children whose parents had joined the rescue teams. The trapped miners were 12 meters below ground, buried behind tons of collapsed rock and twisted metal. The rescue teams worked with desperate efficiency, but Zethkar's enhanced senses could detect what the humans could not. Several of the trapped men were dying. Their heartbeats grew weaker with each passing hour. Oxygen levels in the collapsed section dropped steadily. "We need industrial boring equipment," Park Ji-won reported over the comm system, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "At current rate, we won't reach them for another 8 hours. Nearest equipment is 6 hours away by transport," Lee Dong-hae replied. "Keep digging." Zethkar watched rescue workers push themselves beyond exhaustion. He observed medical personnel preparing for casualties they might not be able to save. He witnessed an entire community pour its resources into preserving lives that represented a tiny fraction of their population. Then he saw her. Yoon Hyun emerged from the rescue command center, her engineering coveralls stained with mineral dust, and her face set in lines of grim determination. She was younger than most of the senior colonists, perhaps 30 standard years, with the calloused hands of someone who worked with machinery and the sharp eyes of a problem solver. She stood at the edge of the collapsed area, studying the rubble with professional assessment. Then she did something that made Zethkar's breath catch in his chest cavity. She looked directly at his concealed position. "I know you're there," Hyun said quietly, her voice barely audible over the industrial noise of the rescue operation. "Whatever you are, whoever you are, I saw the ship 3 days ago. I've been tracking the minor atmospheric disturbances that follow you around." Zethkar remained motionless, his cloaking field maintaining perfect concealment. It should have been impossible for her to detect him. "I don't know what you want with our colony," Hyun continued, crouching beside a massive piece of collapsed support beam. "Maybe you're here to study us. Maybe you're deciding whether we're worth conquering. I don't really care about your motives right now." She placed her hand against the twisted metal, her expression shifting from professional assessment to desperate plea. "But I know you can phase through solid matter. I've seen the minor quantum fluctuations around the residential areas where you've been observing us. And right now there are 7 people dying 12 meters below this rock pile. People with families. People with children. People who risk their lives every day to build something better on this frontier world." Zethkar felt something unprecedented. Uncertainty. This human had not only detected his presence but had deduced his capabilities with remarkable accuracy. More disturbing, she was asking for his help. "I'm not asking you to reveal yourself," Hyun said, standing and backing away from the collapse site. "I'm not asking you to explain what you are or why you're here. I'm just asking you to save them. Please." For several long moments, Zethkar remained frozen. Every instinct, every programmed response, every cultural imperative of his species screamed against what she was requesting. Voidstalkers were destroyers, not saviors. They brought death, not life. They inspired fear, not hope. But below the collapsed tunnel, 7 heartbeats grew weaker. Zethkar deactivated his cloaking field. His imposing form materialized beside the rubble pile. 8 feet of chitinous death made manifest. Hyun took an involuntary step backward, her engineer's confidence momentarily overwhelmed by the reality of what she had been addressing, but she didn't flee. "Thank you," she whispered. Without responding, Zethkar began to phase through the collapsed tunnel system. His molecular structure shifted into an incorporeal state, allowing him to pass through solid rock as easily as empty space. Within minutes, he had mapped the entire collapse, located the trapped miners, and identified the most efficient extraction route. The rescue took 43 minutes. Zethkar would phase into the trapped pocket, stabilize the most critically injured miner, and carry him through solid rock to the surface. 7 trips. 7 lives pulled from certain death by a being whose very existence was antithetical to preservation. When the last survivor was brought to safety, Zethkar found himself surrounded by the rescue teams. They stared at him with expressions he had never encountered, not fear but awe mixed with gratitude. Park Ji-won stepped forward, his mining suit torn and his face streaked with dust and tears. "You saved them. You saved all of them. Dr. Han." Soo-jin was already treating the injured, her medical expertise focused entirely on preserving the lives Zethkar had retrieved, but she paused long enough to meet his four-eyed gaze. "Thank you," she said simply. As dawn broke over New Busan, Zethkar retreated to his ship, his mind reeling from the night's events. For the first time in 3 millennia, he had preserved life instead of taking it. The sensation was alien, uncomfortable, and strangely addictive. He tried to convince himself it had been an aberration, a momentary lapse in judgment. Tomorrow he would return to his original purpose. Tomorrow he would remember what he was. But as he settled into his meditation cycle, Zethkar found himself thinking not of destruction, but of 7 heartbeats that continued because of his choice. Word traveled faster than light in the galaxies, communication networks. Within days of the rescue at New Busan, reports began circulating through underworld channels, diplomatic corps, and military intelligence networks. A void stalker had been seen preserving human life. The news was so unprecedented that most recipients dismissed it as fabricated propaganda or mistranslated data. Zethkar remained unaware of the growing attention his actions had attracted. He had extended his stay at New Busan indefinitely, telling himself he needed to complete his analysis of human behavior before proceeding with their elimination. The truth which he refused to acknowledge was that he had become fascinated by the daily rhythms of colony life. The rescued miners had recovered with remarkable speed. Park Ji-won returned to work within a week, though Dr. Han Soo-jin had restricted him to surface operations until his lung function fully normalized. The other survivors similarly resumed their routines with minimal disruption, as if nearly dying in a tunnel collapse was simply another frontier hazard to be overcome. What struck Zethkar most profoundly was how the rescue had affected the broader community. Rather than treating the event as an isolated crisis, the colonists had used it as an opportunity to strengthen their emergency protocols. They conducted additional safety drills, upgraded their seismic monitoring equipment, and established redundant communication systems for future emergencies. They learned from near disaster and grew stronger. It was a response pattern Zethkar had never encountered in his extensive catalog of species behavior. Yoon Hyun had become an unexpected point of contact. She continued to address him during his evening observations, always respectfully, never demanding responses he wasn't prepared to give. She would update him on colony improvements, mention particularly interesting engineering challenges, or simply acknowledge his presence with a friendly greeting. "The atmospheric processor efficiency is up 12% since we installed the new filtration arrays," she reported one evening, speaking to the apparently empty space where Zethkar maintained his concealed position. Park Ji-won suggested the modification after analyzing mineral compositions from the deeper tunnels. "Sometimes the best innovations come from our miners. They understand the planet better than anyone else." These one-sided conversations gradually became a routine. Zethkar found himself anticipating. Heian possessed a sharp intelligence and a perspective on human cooperation that helped explain the colony's unusual resilience. Through her observations, he began to understand that New Busan's strength came not from individual capability but from collective adaptation. On the 15th day of his extended observation, everything changed. The ships arrived without warning, 3 sleek vessels that dropped out of hyperspace and immediately took aggressive formations around the planet. Zethkar recognized the design immediately. Void Stalker hunter craft, crewed by his own kind and equipped with weapons designed specifically to kill beings like himself. The lead ship broadcast on ancient frequency codes that hadn't been used in centuries. "Zethkar of the 7th Brood, you have been declared corrupt by the Stalker Conclave. Submit for cleansing or face the hunt." Zethkar's chest cavity constricted with something that might have been fear. not for himself but for the humans below. Void Stalker hunters operated with a simple philosophy: eliminate the corruption and everything it had contacted. If they declared him compromised by human influence, they would sterilize New Busan as a matter of course. The colonists detected the new arrivals within minutes. Emergency protocols activated across the settlement as defensive systems came online. New Busan possessed military-grade shields and weapons arrays, standard equipment for frontier worlds in dangerous sectors, but their technology was generations behind Void Stalker capabilities. Zethkar materialized in the colony's command center, his sudden appearance causing several technicians to reach for weapons before recognizing him. "Those ships," he said without preamble, addressing Lee Donghae directly. "They're here to kill me, and they'll destroy your colony in the process." The administrator studied the tactical display with professional calm. "How long do we have?" "They're following protocol. 1 standard hour to evacuate civilians before they begin bombardment." "Evacuation to where?" Dr. Han Soo-jin had entered the command center, her medical kit replaced by a sidearm and tactical gear. "Our transport capacity can't handle 3,000 people in an hour, and there's nowhere to run on this planet." Yoon Haeun spoke from her position at the engineering console. "We fight." The suggestion was absurd. New Busan's weapons might slow the hunters, but 3 Void Stalker ships could reduce the colony to atomic dust within minutes once they committed to attack. "No," Zethkar said firmly. "You evacuate. I'll lead them away from the planet." "Where?" Haeun demanded. "They're faster than your ship. They have better weapons. You're 1 against 3. Before Zethkar could respond, Park Ji-won's voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Mining Team 7. We've rigged the atmospheric processors to overload. If those ships want to destroy our home, they'll have to do it through a radiation field that'll scramble their sensors." "Team 12 here," another voice added. "Defensive positions established at grid coordinate 77 Alpha. We're not running." Within minutes, similar reports flooded the communication networks. The colonists weren't evacuating. They were preparing to fight 3 ships that could annihilate them without effort. "You don't understand," Zethkar said, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of desperate urgency. "These are Void Stalkers. Your weapons can't hurt them. Your shields won't stop them. They'll kill every one of you." Lee Donghae looked up from the tactical display where he'd been coordinating defensive positions. "Maybe, but you saved 7 of our people. That makes you one of us, and we don't abandon our own." Dr. Han Soo-jin added, "Besides, where would we go? This is our home. These are our lives we've built here. If we're going to die, we'll die protecting what matters." The hour passed quickly. Zethkar spent the time trying unsuccessfully to convince the colonists to evacuate, while they methodically prepared defenses that would be utterly inadequate against the approaching threat. Their determination was simultaneously admirable and heartbreaking. When the Void Stalker ships began their attack approach, something unprecedented happened. The colonists positioned themselves between Zethkar and the incoming threat. Lund. Leader Lee Donghae to approaching vessels. The administrator broadcast on standard diplomatic frequencies. "The being you're hunting is under our protection. Withdraw from this system or face the consequences." The response was a particle beam that struck New Busan's primary shield generator, reducing it to vapor in seconds. The battle that followed lasted 37 minutes. The colonists fought with the same calm determination Zethkar had observed in their daily routines, manning defensive positions that were destroyed moments after activation, coordinating evacuation procedures for civilians even as their own positions came under fire. Yoon Haeun died protecting the power core that maintained their communications array. She had been trying to boost the signal strength to call for help when a hunter's weapon found its target. Park Ji-won fell while manually targeting the colony's heavy artillery, buying precious minutes for others to reach safety. Dr. Han Soo-jin died treating wounded defenders who refused to abandon their posts. One by one, the humans who had shown Zethkar a different way of existing gave their lives to protect him from his own kind. When the last defensive position fell, and the hunters finally stood before him, Zethkar felt something crack in the deepest part of his consciousness. The emotion was too complex for his species' limited emotional vocabulary, but humans would have recognized it immediately: grief, rage, and underneath both, a burning sense of purpose that had never existed before. The lead hunter, his exoskeleton, bearing the scars of 1,000 battles, regarded Zethkar with professional disdain. "Your corruption runs deeper than anticipated. These creatures have poisoned your mind with their weakness." Their weakness? Zethkar looked around at the devastated colony, at the bodies of beings who had chosen to die rather than abandon him. They stood against gods of death to protect someone they barely knew. What strength do we possess that compares to that? The hunter's mandibles clicked in dismissal. Sentiment: the corruption must be purged before it spreads. As the hunters prepared to deliver final judgment, Zethkar made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. He thought of Yoon Haeun's steady voice providing evening updates. He remembered Dr. Han Soo-jin's casual offer of kimchi stew. He recalled young Lee Min-ho asking if he wanted to play. For the first time in 3 millennia, Zethkar fought not to destroy, but to preserve. The battle was swift and brutal. When it ended, 3 hunter ships drifted as expanding clouds of debris in New Busan's orbit, and Zethkar knelt among the ruins of the colony that had taught him the meaning of sacrifice. In his claws, he held Yoon Haeun's engineering datapad. Her final entry was a message addressed to him. "Thank you for showing us that monsters can choose to be heroes. Promise me you'll protect the others. Someone should protect those who try to be good." Surrounded by the ashes of beings who had died for him, Zethkar spoke an oath that would reshape the galaxy's balance of power. "I swear by the memory of the fallen, by the courage of those who stood against the darkness, by the hope that burns, in mortal hearts, I will be humanity's guardian. Let any who threaten them face me first." The legend of the Shadow Guardian began that day in the ruins of New Busan, born from the ashes of sacrifice and the tears of a creature who had finally learned to love. The news of 3 destroyed Voidstalker ships spread through galactic intelligence networks like wildfire. In the 48 hours following the Battle of New Busan, emergency sessions convened in a dozen major star systems. The implications were staggering. Something had not only survived an encounter with multiple Voidstalkers but had emerged victorious. Zethkar remained on the devastated colony world for 7 days, moving through the ruins with mechanical precision. He cataloged the dead, studied their final defensive positions, and tried to understand how beings so fragile had found the courage to face extinction rather than abandon him. The mathematics of their sacrifice defied every strategic doctrine he had learned over 3 millennia. On the 7th day, he began receiving communications. The legend grew with each intervention. Across the galaxy, species that had never heard of Voidstalkers began telling stories of the Shadow Guardian, the darkness that protected the light, the death that preserved life, the monster that had chosen to become a protector. But in the quiet moments between conflicts, Zethkar remembered the voices of New Busan, Yoon Haeun's engineering reports, Dr. Han Soo-jin's casual invitation to lunch, young Lee Min-ho asking if he wanted to play. Their memory drove him forward, a reminder of the oath that had transformed him from predator to guardian. Every human life he preserved honored their sacrifice. Every threat he eliminated fulfilled the promise he had made in the ruins of their home. The galaxy had learned to fear the Voidstalkers for their ability to bring death. Now it would learn to fear one of their kind for his refusal to allow it. The Shadow Guardians' war had only begun. 6 months after the oath at New Busan, the galaxy had learned a new kind of fear. Not the old terror of Voidstalkers as harbingers of extinction, but something more complex and far more unsettling. The dread of facing a being who had transcended his nature to become something unprecedented. Zethkar moved through the outer, rim territories like a force of nature, appearing wherever humanity faced extinction. His methods had evolved beyond simple elimination of threats. He had become a student of the species he protected, learning their languages, understanding their cultures, and adapting his tactics to preserve not just their lives, but their way of existence. The mining colony of New Guangzhou on the edge of hegemony space became his first lesson in the complexity of protection. The settlement faced a different kind of threat, not military conquest but economic strangulation. The local hegemony governor had imposed impossible taxation rates, forcing the colonists to choose between bankruptcy and abandoning their homes. Traditional void stalker tactics would have involved killing the governor and anyone who supported the taxation policy.